So of the 3 ingredients that you need to meet the purity law, the most important, I don't know, are they all equally important? I think I would argue that water is the most important. It's also probably the most boring. We're here at Ingrained Brewery in Springfield, a town named because there was a field, and in the field there was a spring of pure water.
I think it's as good a story as any other.
That's probably not right at all. But the water that you use here, I mean, can you kind of walk us through how clean the water is down here and what you do to make sure that really the most basic building block of your product is as good as it can be?
Exactly. So here in Springfield, our water source is the lake. So I don't think you probably drove past the lake. You didn't quite make it that far. But that is where we draw the majority of our water supply.
Full disclosure, I haven't been in Springfield since our 8th grade trip down here. It's been a while. I didn't even know you guys had a lake.
Yeah.
It's a big lake.
It's a big lake.
Okay, so that's good water.
It is. Well, so it has to be processed, right? Just like any town, whether you're a well source or you're pulling it from a lake or a river, goes through the water treatment facility, and then they pump it out to us. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what has to happen on the water treatment side, and we're going to talk a little bit about what has to happen here at the brewery before we make beer, right? So I think the best place to start is, where does the water come from? And so we're the Midwest, largely agricultural. That's what most of our ground is for around here. So a lot of the water runs off, right, through the tributaries and into the lake. And so you have a lot of whatever's in those fields is coming into our water supply.
Right, and that's not pleasant to think about, but that you have to take that into consideration.
It's the reality. So we're fortunate, the water treatment folks do the hard work, quite honestly. And one of the things that they're required to manage by law is the level of nitrates, and that's kind of what the challenge is around here. So, and downstream too, a lot of people have probably heard of the dead zone at the end of the Mississippi, right, where it goes into the Gulf.
Right.
We're up to about the size of the state of Connecticut is how big the dead zone is now. And so that's an area that no wildlife lives in because of the pollutants that come from the Mississippi River all the way downstream. And it just so happens that Illinois is, we're one of the biggest contributors to the Mississippi. We have something like 20, don't quote me here because I don't have the math exact, but like something like 26 major tributaries in Illinois.
Right.
And all but 2 or 3 of them feed the Mississippi, which we're the only state that feeds the Mississippi that has that many of our tributaries feeding into it.
So you're welcome, Mississippi River.
That's right.
I mean, except for all the pollutants that we're putting into the river.
Well, and so the challenge is that with the modern agricultural methods, mostly we're putting fertilizers into the soil to grow crops, and at least half of that the nitrates don't hold in soil. They're one of the things that kind of washes through, and so they have to put probably twice the amount that they need, hoping that 40% of the nitrogen is left for the plant, and the rest just goes through the water system, and that's what's causing the dead zone. So oxygen is a problem when nitrates are too high. For us as people, there's the byproduct of too much nitrate level or too high of a nitrate level in your water can be cancer causing. There's some birth defects, and so that's why the EPA monitors the local system and what their nitrate level is. And so if the nitrate level gets too high, nitrates are very difficult to take out of water. So I actually don't have that ability here at the brewery. It would require such expensive equipment that I honestly couldn't afford to do it. So I have to rely on the local municipality to take care of that for me.
As a brewer, do you have a palate for different kinds of water? Do you do could you do a flight of water and kind of pick out irregularities or off flavors and kind of figure out?
It would be tough.
Yeah.
It would be tough.
Yeah.
From a base water perspective, I don't think palate-wise you could do it, but we certainly have ways to test, right? And pH is a huge indicator. So
right.
I definitely, so to switch gears into the brewing side, so what do we do in the brewery. And I think almost every brewery is using a carbon filtration. So that's step one. We do not want any kind of chlorine, bromine, any kind of chlorine style product in our beer or in our wort, right? Because it's horrible for yeast health and it can provide off flavors. So that's like step one. You gotta clean that stuff out, which is very easy to do with carbon filtration. I have a big carbon filter behind the brew house here that you can't see. And then step two is most of us, I think, do water treatment depending on the style of beer. And there's a lot of reasons that we do that. And we don't probably have to get into some of the technicalities of that. But really, historically, and this is interesting, why one of the reasons that Anheuser-Busch chose St. Louis is because of the water. And if you look at historically, water made a big difference in beer because they didn't understand the chemistry and how to make modifications, right? So you had regions of the world that are renowned for particular styles of beer because of the water supply.
The brewery is lovely, and I'm glad to see that you guys are taking really the most essential. Am I way off when I say water is the most essential ingredient?
No, it absolutely.
I mean, if somebody just put yeast in a glass,
right?
You wouldn't drink that.
You don't get yeast without water. You don't get hops without water. You don't get barley without water.
Okay, so we're not playing favorites, but clearly, water is my favorite. Thanks for walking us through clean water.
Absolutely.
You can scrape up a few yeast cells, put it in a small flask. It'll start to grow. A lot of it's about starting pure and using good technique at each of these transfers, but you just keep feeding the yeast essentially. Just give it more food and it makes more yeast babies.